This episode is kindly sponsored by Anderson Quigley. Anderson Quigley builds better leaders for a better society. They are industry experts with decades of experience in public sector executive search, interim management and advisory. Driven by their core values, integrity, diversity and hands-on project ownership, they bring their expertise to bear for organisations that focus on society and social development, delivering leadership recruitment in higher education, schools, healthcare, charities, social care, housing, cultural organisations, the arts and government. I'm Susanna Marsden, a higher education consultant who helps to develop and support HE institutions in the UK and beyond. This podcast takes a deep dive into the roles of people who work in this hugely varied higher education sector. Each episode reveals what's involved in a specific role, the career path that led to it, and tips on how to get in and get on in these jobs. My guest in this episode is Joe Cooper, Director of People and Culture at the University of East London. Joe and his team have a pivotal role in supporting the strategic development of the university, and in this episode we discuss how and why the institution has evolved during recent years and where his focus has been as the executive HR lead. Joe also talks about his unique career path from Students' Union Chief Executive into University HR and the importance of remembering that students are always at the heart of university life. Joe, thanks very much for being my guest today and welcome to Job Shadowing HE. You're Director of People and Culture at the University of East London, an institution with over 40,000 students from over 160 nationalities and a strapline of pioneering futures since 1898. Can you tell us a bit more about the strategic focus of the university and its Vision 2028?
Well, firstly, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to spend some time with you. I've been at UEL for about 3.5 years. At that time, we were 3.5 years into the delivery of a 10-year strategy. I don't know if it's unique, but unusually for a university, we're now 7 years into the same strategy. I mean, we used to call ourselves a careers first university, and that was kind of the starting point for Vision 2028. But quite a few other universities have picked up that mantle as well. So we're now calling ourselves a careers first university to kind of indicate we were there before anyone else. But actually, it's that foundational principle. Firstly, which has guided the university since it started in 1898. It was nicknamed the People's University when it started, and that ethos of being there to provide education and purpose and opportunity to people that wouldn't have it otherwise is still very much part of our DNA today. Really at the core of what we do is preparing our students for the skills that they need to kind of have jobs in this continuously changing world and economy. So we're 7 years into the plan. I've been there for half of it. And we're now starting to see the really hard evidence of the work that we've done. So 2 years ago, we jumped from being in the bottom quartile in terms of the National Student Survey to being in the top 10 in the country and the first in London. If you bought the Guardian a couple of weeks ago, you'll find out we've kind of moved into the top section of the Guardian league table. And it was announced last week that we're on the shortlist for the second year in a row to be the University of the Year. So, I mean, the accolades are kind of important because they are kind of recognition of the effort that's gone into it, but more importantly, they're a reflection of the outcomes that we're achieving for students and that or enabling students to achieve for themselves. So it feels like a really great place to be. Probably, I do tell people that moving to UEL was the best career decision I ever made, and that's still holding true now.
And as Director of People and Culture, you're one of several professional service directors at the university. How would you describe the function of your role and that of your team in supporting UEL?
Well, first I should probably address the role title because I'm quite often asked what's the difference between a Director of HR and a Director of People and Culture. Essentially, a Director of People and Culture is a Director of HR with a massive ego who likes kind of big job titles. But joking aside, obviously I'm responsible for delivering the kind of HR services you'd expect to see. So making sure people get paid on time and have contracts that work, and get access to kind of information that they need. Employee relations, when things go wrong or things need addressing, that there's kind of fair and transparent processes for doing that. A huge change that I introduced when I started was a big expansion of our talent acquisition or staff recruitment service, because attracting the best people to work for us is fundamental to our strategy. So not just the process for finding potential candidates and then supporting them through their application, but also how we present ourselves as an employer and setting ourselves apart is crucial to what we do. And then the other section within the kind of HR is employee engagement and experience. We put a lot of time and effort into thinking about what it's like to work at UEL, making sure we fully understand the staff voice and the staff experience and feeding that in, and making sure staff have access to the kind of learning and development and communication and connection activities that make them want to kind of develop their career with us. In addition to that, I also look after health and safety, and I attend the University Executive Board. And that's where the people and culture side comes in. So I'm the essentially the strategic business partner for the senior staff. So kind of make sure I'm supporting them with their kind of their people issues and anything that they want to do from that perspective. But also then more broadly than that, I'm kind of responsible for kind of understanding what we need from a kind of atmosphere or culture perspective to deliver the strategic objectives, and either putting things in place directly or advising the senior team in terms of how to do that.
And you started your higher education career in 2003 as Deputy Chief Executive of the Students' Union at the University of Kent. You then became Managing Director of Imperial College Union, and then in 2016, you moved to the other side into a university, firstly working within Imperial and then over to UEL in 2022, as you say, 3 years ago. Can you give us some insight into the career path of Students' Union into university HR, and what have your motivations been along the way?
I mean, I think probably the short answer is I'm still trying to work out what I'll do when I grow up, and by that I mean I've really enjoyed my career up to this point, but I've never thought too many steps ahead. I think people say career is about being in the right place at the right time, and you can't control the right time, but you can control being in the right place by taking the advantage of the opportunities that you have when you're in the current role. So it all started, I think, when I came back to university at the beginning of my third year, and my friend said, well, we've all decided you're going to be president of the Students' Union next year, which was a surprise to me. So I ended up being a sabbatical officer for a year, and then I did a elected role within NUS for a short time. And then I got my first job at the University of Kent Students' Union. I started off as student activities coordinator. So I was responsible for student media and course reps and student training and a few other bits. And that kind of diversity in that role is something that's unique, I think, in students' unions and really sort of played out. So I left Kent 8 years later. I was Deputy Chief Executive and I was responsible for all kinds of stuff. I had a budget of 8 million, I had 200 staff, and I was in my early 30s. So I had huge opportunities to firstly understand and manage a diverse range of services and understand how to do that, even if I wasn't the specialist in that area. But also, by the nature of it, had quite a lot of insight into how universities run, working with senior staff in the universities. So kind of was quite plugged into the sector at that point, and I started to really sort of fall in love with it. I then moved to Imperial College Students' Union as a chief executive, and essentially there I was responsible for a kind of an organisational turnaround. So we needed to sort the finances out, we needed to sort out the governance, but I think the thing I enjoyed the most was making it a really good place to work. So I think it was a really difficult environment when I arrived. I remember I think I was there for a couple of months before Christmas, and just before Christmas I called all the staff for a team meeting to give my reflections and how I saw the future and give my feedback. And I learned a few weeks later that most of the staff were convinced I was just going to fire them in that meeting because they couldn't really conceive why the chief exec would want to meet with all the staff. So it just gives you an idea of what kind of place it was. So fast forward 4 years, and we became the first Students' Union to receive the kind of the top rating in Investors in People, right? And again, the accolade's important, but it actually was more of a reflection of the journey we'd come on and become a place where people really enjoyed their work, they felt invested in, they were engaged with the strategy, and that then played out in terms of how the organisation performed. I realised I didn't want to do student unions anymore. I think I'd done it for 15 years, and I got a huge amount out of it, but I didn't want to become stale. So I was thinking about what else to do. I knew I wanted to do something in universities, and I was talking to the director of HR at Imperial College at the time, and she said, "Would you consider coming and working with me?" And I was like, absolutely not. But then we talked about it for a while, and the application process played through, and I realised that it was building an organisation that people wanted to work in. The employee engagement side of it, that was actually starting to really give me energy. So it was that side kind of HR that I moved into. So then I was deputy director of HR there for 7 years, and really enjoyed that. Learned a huge amount, and then moved to UEL as my first director role 3.5 years ago. So each stage seemed to make sense at the time, but probably if you told me 12 years ago I'd be a director of HR at university, I would have laughed. So it's about kind of taking those opportunities as and when they arise.
UEL has around 1,700 staff, and as Director of People and Culture, as you said before, you have a significant strategic responsibility in the frameworks that support those colleagues, but you're also dependent on many people across the university to play their part in making things work well. Where does the role of Director of People and Culture start and stop? And how do you approach that, that's an issue for HR, not me scenario that can often be heard within higher education institutions?
It's always a balance. I think I'll kind of go back to this point about me coming into HR relatively late in my career and at a relatively senior level. I was very self-conscious about it when I took that deputy job at Imperial. And I know for a fact there are probably lots of people in that team thinking, who is this guy who's come in as a deputy director? He's never worked in HR before, and I can sort of understand that perspective. But the reason I was brought in, and what the director said to me at the time, is I've got loads of kind of HR professionals. I need someone who understands how the university works, what it's like to be on the other side, what it's like to be a customer of HR, and understand what the organisation is trying to achieve, rather than kind of coming at it from a kind of HR purist perspective. So when I did the kind of deputy role, I kind of earned my stripes. I kind of got qualified, and I learned a lot. And now, rather than feeling self-conscious about my non-HR background, I see it as a really positive thing. So when I talk to my team, I tell them that story, but I also try and get across to them that we are here to support the organisation. We're here to help the leadership deliver the strategy. Part of that is making sure that the organisation is safe and people are treated well, but we are there to kind of to support leaders and managers in terms of delivering what the organisation needs. So I think that I always have that in mind when I was trying to think about what is my role and what is the role of the team. In terms of where the lines are between HR, leaders, managers, staff, it's always a bit of a challenge. In reality, it needs to be a partnership. I think there's a balance between having some clear processes so they're consistently followed, but I think it's also something about being pragmatic. Like some managers need additional support when they're working through a difficult situation, whether that's a change in structure or disciplinary or whatever. Some feel quite confident to do it themselves. Some might feel a bit too confident to do themselves. So actually, we have to understand and know the individuals that we're working with, and to make sure that we're providing the support. So that kind of partnering mentality is really important as well. It's important that you don't just kind of give a out of the box process to deal with a situation. It's because we're dealing with humans, we're dealing with contexts that are different in each kind of circumstances. So developing those relationships is really important at every level.
And you mentioned earlier about your title, the Director of People and Culture, and you have a role in supporting cultural change across the university. And that cultural change phrase is commonly used in institutions and maybe addressed with differing levels of success across the sector. What approach have you been taking to cultural change at UEL, and what would you say are the key parts to getting it right?
Obviously, the culture is a bit of an amorphous concept, and there's a danger that culture is something you can spend a lot of time talking about, but actually not doing anything to kind of address. So my kind of short answer is you actually have to kind of put things in place which are going to change how people behave and act. So I guess one example for us is our kind of we know that as a university which has a history of struggling financially and operationally, and we've come through that, but we've come through that by really focusing on organizational, team, and individual performance, right? And that's to some extent that's kind of addressing issues of poor performance, and that's still something we need to continue to get better at. But it's also about recognizing good performance as well. So if we're saying actually culturally we want to be an organization that performs well and recognizes good performance, you've actually got to do something about it. We've developed a scheme called the Shared Success Award, which is essentially an additional element of reward on top of the contractual pay, which is related to how we do as an organization, how teams perform, and how individuals perform as well. So culturally, that's quite unusual for universities. And obviously, there's kind of initially some discomfort, and we obviously have to implement it in a way that's kind of consistent and fair and that people understand. But we have implemented it. So last year, staff, depending on the context, would have received additional pieces of reward based on how the team performed, based on how they individually performed, and how the organisation did financially, and that then influences behaviour, right? So rather than trying to design something which was that was completely inoffensive to anyone or was completely perfectly designed on paper, we decided to kind of implement it and continually learn as we do it. So I think if you're going to change a culture, and we're not talking about kind of protecting a culture, that's a different thing. If you're going to change a culture, you have to kind of do things which are bold and different and create a reaction. And I think that's a good example of it.
We know that in the higher education sector is experiencing some tough times at the moment. And one of the most visible outcomes of that we're seeing are significant restructures and staff redundancy schemes in many, not all, institutions. A director in your position isn't responsible for making those decisions unless it's your own team. But a team like yours has a central role in working through those situations and colleagues with managers in the way that you sort of talked about earlier, and how you partner with colleagues across the institution. Now, my own experience of working with HR teams is that they very much get on with the job, and you see very little, if anything, about how they're doing themselves. But how do HR colleagues working in these types of roles manage their resilience, and what sort of support's available to them?
I mean, obviously, that is a particular challenge for HR teams. I think it's important to recognise that there's all it's always challenging for whoever's having to kind of work through those processes. And you think of the HR team, you also think of the staff who are affected. I think the other thing to remember is the managers who are responsible for delivering those changes need a lot of support as well, and it's kind of very, very, very challenging for them. Nobody likes those situations. We've avoided having to go through major organisational restructure, but one of the reasons for that is because we've been sort of able and willing and taken the active decision to make difficult decisions as and when they present themselves, to be in a resilient position in general. And what that means is actually there's quite a big load on the HR team to address smaller scale challenges and make those not organisational level but kind of departmental level changes. So a lot of effort has to go into those processes, and it does have a load. Actually, it does kind of add up, and that's something we reflected on over the summer to kind of make sure that we were checking in with people and making sure they were okay. So I think the first thing within the team is we're really focused on having a really strong internal kind of community. Making sure kind of my leaders and the managers are keeping in touch with their team, making sure they're okay, and having good kind of interpersonal relationships. We make sure the team connect on a regular basis, so the whole team gets together every fortnight on a short kind of stand-up meeting. We have away days 4 times a year, again with the whole team face to face, to give people the opportunity to reflect and spend time. Talking about quality time a lot. It's really important we spend quality time with each other, understanding what's going on with each other and learning from each other, but also just taking a time to kind of reflect and understand the experiences that we're going through. So that's kind of one side of it is a place that people want to be, and people feel comfortable sharing when they are feeling overloaded, or and whether that's a workload overload or whether it's just the kind of mental load of dealing with sort of difficult situations. The other side, the harder side of it, is just making sure that our role design is right and making sure we're allocating resources in the right way, and that we are constantly looking at that. I think the other thing that helps as well, going back to this kind of this question around culture, is making sure that everybody understands why they're doing it. So, do people feel connected with the vision of the organisation? So, we have a set of objectives for the year which directly relate to Vision 2028. All of my direct reports have their own set of objectives which relate directly to our overarching objectives, and all of our team have objectives that relate to those. And that does relate to it, because I think it's, if you are constantly working hard and you don't really see what it adds up to, you don't necessarily think it's recognised or that it's kind of important to how the university succeeds, then that is, from an emotional perspective, really difficult. But actually, if you flip all those things around and actually think it does get recognised, it is important, and it all adds up to the organisation's success, which gets celebrated, then that can actually completely reframe how you see that work. Talking about supporting the restructuring of a team, right? That in itself is not going to be fun, right? And you have to do it in a fair way, but also you have to make sure that everyone involved is well treated and looked after, and that can be a drain. But if you understand that is around the organisation either being more resilient for the future, or if you realise this is about students getting a better education, then it kind of helps, right, in terms of the motivation. So I think that's a really important part of it as well.
I think your point there about vision is really important. I mean, when they've got those institutions that are going through those significant restructures and staff changes, I mean, in many ways, that's one phase, isn't it? Because the next phase is actually about how those teams are rebuilding and how they then support the institution. In terms of that rebuilding phase, where would you say the focus should be?
I guess the first thing I'd say is it's really important you avoid a situation where you're making a big organizational change as a response to being in trouble and being in a situation where it's almost framed as rebuilding. So the more difficult, bold, innovative decisions you can make earlier, the less likely it's going to feel like that. But then I think if you are, whether in that situation or whatever changes you're trying to deliver, it's really important that everybody understands the why. Where are we trying to get to? It's not just avoiding being in the situation we're in now, but what's the positive state that you're trying to get to? What does that mean for the organisation? What does that mean for the organisation as a place to work? What does that mean in terms of the organisation's academic mission? And understanding the positive outcomes of making those changes. So whatever that is, it needs to be really understood and really well articulated, and then driving the changes that you are making.
You've given us some insights earlier on into the functions that you have in your job. What does an example month in the life of your role look like?
It really does vary and one of the good things about universities is that they kind of, as the academic year develops, you feel like you enjoy the kind of, not the atmospheric seasons, but the seasons of a university. And in terms of the kind of things I get up to, I attend our university executive board, which meets every week. So that's kind of where I try and make sure I'm fully connected with what's going on and the strategy, and also connected with all the other senior team members. What I then do is meet with my senior management team immediately after that. So there's a really clear kind of information flow. And actually, that's one of the, going back to that kind of question of culture, that's one of the things about University of East London, is that we are quite fast paced in terms of how we make decisions and how we manage things. So we try and gear up so we are able to make relatively quick decisions, but also pass on that information very quickly, kind of down the line and around the organisation. So that's a really important part of our kind of weekly rhythm. The other thing I try and do regularly is just getting out and about, sort of visiting different parts of the organisation, talking to staff, and just kind of getting a sense of how that feels. And I have regular meetings with our trade unions, and then the other part of getting out about is actually getting out of UEL, and just make sure I'm keeping on top of my kind of knowledge and practice, but also talking to people who either work in different universities or work in HR in different sectors or completely different organizations, and just trying to keep my ideas kind of fresh.
That's an interesting point you make there about meeting with HR colleagues, both from within the sector and outside. Is that something that's important to you, to sort of go beyond the sector in terms of, I guess, what you're doing in your own, but also your own development as well?
Yeah, for both reasons. I think, I mean, the sector is great, isn't it, for kind of internal support and collaboration. That's one of the things I really love about it, and the kind of the university HR directors network is really good. And there's kind of a little kind of there's an understanding between HR directors in terms of you can sort of share kind of situations you're in that you wouldn't be able to kind of share with anyone else. So that's really good. But almost by definition, when you're just looking within the sector for your kind of support and ideas, you're fishing in a limited pool. So I think it's really, really important to look outside the sector, and I think that's something that UEL is really kind of keen on as well, both in terms of kind of leading good practice, whether that's kind of performance management, and we talked about the Shared Success Award earlier. We've drawn on support and ideas. We've got two great external governors actually who have a kind of lots of kind of HR experience, but none of it's in HE. So we've drawn on some of their ideas, and you then have to translate it into something that works from the sector. But I don't think we would have come up with the approach that we had if we had not didn't have that external input. I think the other thing is more on the kind of service delivery and operational side. I think HE has a tendency to do things probably a little bit manual, probably not. Even universities that are very good at the technology side, on the academic side of the organisation, are often, on the kind of operational side, not good at all. So I think there's something about looking at outside about really good practice for delivering services, because you're going back to this sector challenge discussion. We're going to have to get significantly more efficient, effective, and cost effective in terms of how we deliver all of our kind of professional services if we're going to kind of get ahead of the funding challenges we've got. So one of the things I'm doing over the next few weeks is attending a kind of an international kind of HR conference, but which is more on the tech side, and just trying to understand, how can we sort of really think differently about how we deliver our services going forward. So yeah, it's really important to kind of look outside of the sector for all that kind of stuff.
I just wanted to pick up on one other thing you mentioned earlier on about your executive board and your point there you've just made about efficiency. You talked about quick decision making, which I'm sure will be music to many people's ears. What is it about the university or about the executive board that's enabling you to make those quicker decisions?
It's a good question. I think part of the way we operate is a positive legacy of the leadership. This leadership coming in sort of 7 years ago to a very challenging picture. Very difficult decisions had to be made very quickly to ensure that, like, the survival of the organisation, and part of that means cutting through what many universities have to go to have in place in terms of your kind of internal decision process. So we've actually got a very kind of lean, centralized kind of decision making kind of infrastructure. We meet every week, and I mean that's non-trivial, because you don't have to wait a term to kind of get a decision. But I think the other thing is that we are the point I was making earlier about we're still on the same strategy 7 years later. We're absolutely focused on those strategic objectives, and we do not drift away from those. Now, obviously, we update it and develop it, and the how we do it has significantly changed over 7 years. But everything we do is sort of driven into Vision 2028, which makes those decisions, I think, easier. We understand the kind of the why we're making that decision. I think the other thing we've got is a really effective, supportive, and challenging board of governors who are bought into the strategy, but provide that kind of oversight as well.
We talked a few moments ago about human resources departments, whether that's within higher education or in other parts of the sector. And, it is a professional service that's common to any sizable organisation. It's not unique to higher education, as is the case for a service like student and academic services, for example. How easy is it to attract HR professionals into the HE sector, and what do career paths look like?
I've had disagreements with kind of HR colleagues around what career paths should look like within HR. I think the traditional view is that kind of we support people to be generalists and sort of develop their kind of CIPD status, and actually the way that we structured as an HR team should be designed to support that. And I don't agree with that at all. I think HR is actually a range. If you think about the different services that I articulated earlier, it's a range of different specialisms, right? And the crucial thing is that people have to be really good and want to excel in those specialisms. So I've been in two different situations where recruitment, as in staff recruitment, wasn't sort of seen as a specialism within an HR team. It was just kind of an adjunct to what a generalist did. And we know actually, going back to this point around looking outside the sector, in the real world, right, people have careers in recruitment and really good ones, and they love doing recruitment and they're really good at it. So I think it's really important, firstly, that we're kind of understanding what the university needs us to deliver, and then we are focused on bringing people in. And then what tends to happen is that so thinking about the recruitment team, we bring in really great recruitment people at all kinds of levels who have an amazing experience across a range of different sectors, but have worked for organizations where the pay might be lower, the benefits might be lower, might be more kind of performance based than we are. But actually, what they find is actually that kind of balance between being an organization which is just value performance, but also you have really good benefits and good leave, and also it's an organization where you can connect to the vision, is really attractive for people. So they can bring their skills, but they can work for an organization which is more values driven. So thinking of it like that really helps us. So we've completely changed the HR team over the past 3 years. The vast majority of the people in my team at the moment have joined since I joined, but framing it like that has really helped. I think also from a UEL perspective, the fact that we are in a good financial position and a growing financial position, but also that kind of values piece and how we're really delivering on that core mission attracts people to us as well. So I don't worry too much around whether there's enough kind of HR professionals to go around. What I think about is what is different and unique about working for UEL, but also about working for people and culture at UEL, and that tends to help.
And thinking about staff recruitment more broadly, I mean, to what extent does the diversity of the overall staff profile at UEL reflect the diversity of the student profile?
That's a really sort of difficult question, right? Because one of the things that's changed about UEL a lot over the past sort of 10 years is the international student profile. So I think we're around about half of our students being international. So the student profile is probably very different to the overarching staff profile because of that. And we do want to ensure that we match the broad student profile because it's really important from a student perspective. So we work really carefully on that. We've got a unit called the Office for Institutional Equity, and they work with us from a diversity perspective for staff, but also for students, and making sure that the environment is positive and inclusive and diverse, and that goes all the way through how we do recruitment to how we do teaching. And we also look very carefully at things like pay gap, so that we don't have a gender pay gap, and that's taken a lot of work and effort and focus. We're now working on addressing our diversity pay gap, which is a big intractable challenge for organisations that we're looking to be very transparent about. Really focus on the data and then kind of addressing those issues. So we think about the diversity of our student profile. We think about the diversity of our local area as well. But we also think about the overarching diversity of our staff body and how that plays out in terms of how we are as an employer.
Finishing up our conversation today, you said at the beginning that you started your career in students' unions. In your role now as UEL's Director of People and Culture, do you still get the opportunity to have contact with students, and is that important to you?
it's very important, I think. The short answer is obviously not as much as I used to. Fortunate enough to attend our Board of Governors meetings, and we have 2 student governors who attend that. Outside of UEL, I've just finished up now, but for the past 9 years, I was a trustee of the Students' Union at Christ Church, where I studied. So I've kind of tried to stay connected with the kind of student side, outside of my day job as well. I think the other thing is last week we had our graduations, always incredibly inspiring. I always say to any of my staff when they join, make sure you go and volunteer at a graduation. And that's because that is what we do at universities, and particularly when you're working in professional services, you can forget that. So whether you're processing payroll or whether you're kind of looking after the grounds, or whether you're working in HR, you can really focus on that, and actually taking a step back and really understanding what it all adds up to is really important. There's a cliched story about the kind of the NASA cleaner and saying you put a man on the moon. The student walking across the stage to receive their degree, sometimes holding a baby, often with their families cheering in the background, just really celebrating that moment. That's our man on the moon, right? And it's so important that we remember that. So it always reminds you what it all adds up to, which is really important in any university role, but particularly in professional services, that we stay connected with the vision, and seeing that from a human perspective is you can't really replace that.
Joe, it's been great talking with you. Thanks so much for being my guest today.
Thank you.
Job Shadowing HE is proudly supported by the Association of Higher Education Professionals as a valuable source of professional insight. It was presented by Susanna Marsden, and you can find out more about her consultancy work at susannamarsden.co.uk. Audio production and music was by me, Rhodri Marsden. Find out more about this podcast and hear previous episodes at jobshadowinghe.com.